Now, this week marks the 26th anniversary of Princess Diana's death, and unheard tapes have since been released. This audio was recorded by Diana in the 90s for her biographer Andrew Morton. Let's take a listen.
He was so grown up, and he was Diana, a kindergarten teacher. I mean, the whole thing was ridiculous. And my husband won't even talk to Mummy, barely. Because at Harry's christening, Charles went up to Mummy and said, you know, he was so disappointed, we thought it'd be a girl. And Mummy snapped his head off and said, you should realise how lucky you are to have a child that's normal. Ever since that day, a shutter's come down, and that's what he does when he gets somebody answering back at him, so to speak.
Some interesting revelations there, Esther. Firstly, that King Charles wanted a girl instead of Prince Harry, but also Diana claiming that the marriage to King Charles was ridiculous. How damaging is this for the king?
Yeah, look, the whole Charles and Diana saga will always kind of be a stain on King Charles's past. We know that that marriage was tumultuous. Often, you know, the media tends to kind of whitewash a lot of the tenuous moments in their marriage. So we know that Diana was very unhappy and she had mental health issues, and King Charles had his affair with Camilla, and they weren't a very good pairing. But obviously the only people that know the truth, the absolute truth of what happened in their marriage is King Charles and Princess Diana. The reality is, whenever these kind of rehashings of history come up, it is obviously damaging, but I think not to the extent that it was when the revelations first came out. Of course, we know that King Charles and Princess Diana's marriage was ill-advised. Hindsight is 2020. But we also know that King Charles wanted actually a girl, which actually isn't as scandalous as you might think. You know, you would think that in the whole kind of sort of tradition of aristocracy, he would have favoured two boys, because obviously boys at the time would be in the line of succession. So it was actually potentially quite forward-thinking of him to want a girl and to want to have that kind of balanced family in that way. But obviously his mother-in-law at the time was very unhappy about it. These are the kind of things that we know will always come up whenever we talk about King Charles, and it's kind of baked into the cake. There will always be some sort of drama surrounding the royal family, and particularly individual members of the royal family. At the moment, I don't think it's particularly damaging. The Queen is now Camilla, and the public seems to have made their peace with that. I must highlight that this documentary, following the 26th year anniversary of Princess Diana's death, was actually aired in the US. So this is more tailored towards American audiences who may not have the kind of same affinity for the royal family, or the same knowledge of the history of the royal family as we do here.
OK, well, it'll be interesting to see if more tapes are released then. Just finally, of course, Mohammed Al Fayed, that self-made Egyptian billionaire who, of course, bought Harrods department store, has this week died. Of course, his son, Dodi, died with Princess Diana in the car crash in 1997. Esther, what was Mohammed Al Fayed's relationship like with the royal family?
His relationship with the royal family and sort of British aristocracy and the British government at best was quite tenuous. We have to remember that Mohammed Al Fayed actually added the Al in his name when he moved to the UK. He always kind of mimicked himself as some sort of renegade royal of a house unknown. He lived in the UK for decades, and he was refused British citizenship by the government. So that kind of soured relations between him and the government. He actually threatened to move to France, where he owned the Ritz in Paris, because he thought the French were warmer to him. But he grew up in effectively what was British Egypt. He always had an affinity for Britain and for the royal family. But the British aristocracy never warmed to him, even though he was very, very wealthy and a self-made man by all accounts. You know, the sources of his wealth were always tenuous, and he always seemed like the kind of self-serving upstart that really the aristocracy kind of turned their nose down at. After, you know, his son Dodi's death and Princess Diana's death, he often made claims that, well, false claims that Princess Diana was pregnant with his son's child at the time of the death, which was, again, unconfirmed rumours, and that she was killed because the royal family didn't want her to have a Muslim child. All these sorts of allegations that effectively were never proven, because for all intents and purposes, they weren't true. He only dropped these sorts of claims and these conspiracies in 2008, and he quoted that it was to stop prolonging the grief of Princess Diana's sons that he knew loved her very much. But Mohammed Al Fayed was a very, very interesting character. He always clearly made it known that he wanted to have some sort of royal appeal. He didn't belong to any royal house that we know of, so the Al in his name was always strange. But yeah, he died having kind of unrealized hopes of some sort of affinity or affiliation with British aristocracy that never materialised.
Yeah, it's fascinating that he really seemed to love the royal family, but perhaps that sort of love wasn't received that well. Esther Krakue, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.